The footage wasn't supposed to surface again, especially not like this. But now that it has, everything people thought they knew about that night is being questioned all over again. A newly leaked clip, unseen angles, different timing, and moments that were never discussed publicly. Has the internet locked in, replaying every second, and what stands out isn't just what's in the video, it's what doesn't line up, because according to the official version of events surrounding King Von, the timeline was already clear. The confrontation, the escalation, the outcome. But this new footage? It tells a slightly different story, one that raises more questions than answers. And now, for the first time in a long time, his family is speaking again. A voice believed to be connected to Von's inner circle reportedly said, "That's not how it went down." Not the way they told it. That statement alone was enough to shift the entire conversation, because if the story doesn't match, then what really happened in those final moments? Fans are shocked, because this isn't just another rumor, this is visual evidence being picked apart frame by frame. People are noticing movements that don't align, reactions that seem delayed, and individuals appearing in places they weren't supposed to be according to earlier reports. And then there's the biggest question of all. Why is this footage only coming out now? Some are saying it was held back, others believe it was overlooked, but there's a growing theory online that this clip was never meant to be seen at all, that it changes too much. That it shifts responsibility, that it opens doors certain people would rather keep closed. Emotions ran high the moment this leak hit, because for Von's family, this isn't just internet speculation, it's personal, it's about truth, it's about closure. And right now, they're making it clear that they're not convinced they've been given either. And if this new footage really does contradict the story everyone accepted, then this case might not be as settled as people think. The moment that footage started circulating, the reaction wasn't instant noise, it was hesitation. People watched it once, then again, then slowed it down, because something about it didn't feel right. Not dramatic, not exaggerated, just off. And when something feels off in a situation that was already considered closed, that's when attention sharpens. For years, the narrative around King Von's final moments has been repeated the same way, clean, direct, and widely accepted. But this new angle, it interrupts that clarity. The timing between movements feels different. The spacing between people looks altered. And most importantly, there are seconds, small but critical, that don't align with what was previously described. That's where the tension begins, because it's not about rewriting everything. It's about questioning the details that were never questioned before. One viewer pointed out that a figure appears earlier in the frame than expected. Another noticed that a reaction from someone nearby seems delayed, almost like they were anticipating something instead of reacting to it. None of these observations confirm anything on their own, but together they create doubt, and doubt changes everything. Fans are shocked, but the reaction isn't chaotic, it's focused. People are analyzing the footage like investigators, not spectators, frame by frame, second by second. Comments aren't just opinions, they're breakdowns. Pause at 23 seconds. Look at the left side. That doesn't match the report. It feels less like discussion and more like examination. At the same time, voices from closer to the situation started surfacing. Not loud, not public, but enough to be noticed. A relative speaking off camera in a clip that quickly disappeared said, "We've been saying something wasn't right. Now people can see why." That statement didn't accuse anyone directly. It didn't offer a new version of events, but it made one thing clear. The family was never fully settled with what they were told. Emotions ran high after that, because once the family steps in, the tone shifts. This isn't just about curiosity anymore. It becomes about truth, about whether the version people accepted was complete or just convenient. Meanwhile, older footage started resurfacing alongside. The new clip, different angles, different sources. Some had been online for years but were never closely examined. Now people are putting them side by side, comparing timelines, trying to see if the pieces actually fit together the way they were originally presented, and the more they compare, the more inconsistencies seem to appear. A key moment that stands out involves positioning. In earlier accounts, certain individuals were described as being in specific places at specific times. But in this new footage, one of those positions looks slightly different. Not drastically, but enough to raise questions. Enough to make people pause and ask, if this part isn't exact, what else might not be? That's how the narrative starts to shift. Not with one big contradiction, but with multiple small ones stacking on top of each other. And then came another detail that pushed things further. A timestamp discrepancy. Viewers noticed that the timing on the new clip doesn't perfectly match the sequence previously discussed in reports. It's subtle. A few seconds here, a slight delay there. But in situations like this, seconds matter. Seconds change context. They change perception. And when those seconds don't line up, it forces people to reconsider everything around them. At the same time, reactions from people connected to the industry remained unusually quiet. No major statements, no attempts to dismiss the footage. Outright, just silence. And in moments like this, silence isn't neutral, it's noticeable. Because if nothing has changed, you expect clarity. You expect someone to step in and say, this doesn't alter the facts, but that hasn't happened. Not yet, and that absence of clarity is what's driving the conversation forward, because right now, nobody is claiming to have all the answers. The footage doesn't explain everything, the family hasn't revealed a full alternate story, but what exists now is something just as powerful, uncertainty, and uncertainty doesn't settle, it grows. That uncertainty didn't stay contained, it started pulling in voices that had stayed quiet for a long time. Not loud statements, not press conferences, just small, controlled reactions that carried more weight than anything official. Because when people close to a situation choose their words carefully, it usually means they're aware of how much those words matter. A longtime associate connected to King Von reportedly spoke during a private conversation that later leaked in fragments. His tone wasn't emotional, it was measured. "We seen things that night, just not everything got shown," he said. That line spread fast because it didn't contradict the known story directly. It suggested there was more to it. We're at context, more moments that never made it into public view, and that idea alone shifted the focus again, because now the conversation isn't just about whether the footage is accurate, it's about what footage exists beyond what people have seen. If one new angle can raise this many questions, how many other angles are out there that haven't been released? And more importantly, who decides which ones get seen? Fans are shocked, but the reaction has evolved. It's no longer just about analyzing clips, it's about tracing access. People are asking who had control over the recordings, who reviewed them first, and why certain angles surface now instead of earlier. The timing feels deliberate to some, delayed to others, but almost nobody believes it's random anymore. Emotions ran high when another piece of information surfaced, a claim that portions of footage from that night were never publicly archived. According to one source, some recordings were considered irrelevant at the time and never circulated beyond a small group. That word irrelevant didn't sit well with viewers, because what's considered irrelevant in the moment can become critical later, especially when timelines are being questioned. And that's exactly what's happening now. A specific sequence in the newly leaked clip started gaining attention, the moment just before everything escalates. In earlier reports, that moment was described as sudden, immediate, but in this version, there appears to be a pause, not long, but noticeable, a gap where people seem aware of something before it fully unfolds. That pause became the center of discussion almost instantly, because pauses change interpretation. If something happens instantly, it feels unpredictable, but if there's a moment before it happens, a shift, a glance, a reaction, it suggests awareness, and awareness introduces a completely different set of questions. Who saw what? Who understood what was about to happen? And why wasn't that detail part of the original narrative? At the same time, reactions from within the circle remained cautious. No one stepped forward with a full explanation, but subtle messages kept appearing. One individual posted, "Truth don't come out all at once. It comes out when it's allowed." That post stayed up for less than an hour before being removed. But like everything else, it was captured, shared, and dissected. The pattern continued. Brief statements, quick deletions, and silence right after. And that silence? It's starting to feel less like coincidence and more like control. Because if everything about that night was already clear, there wouldn't be this level of hesitation. There wouldn't be this careful movement around what's said and what's left unsaid. The way people are reacting now suggests one thing: there's still something sensitive about this situation. Something that hasn't fully settled even after all this time. Meanwhile, comparisons between different accounts of that night kept intensifying. Fans lined up witness statements, old interviews, and previous breakdowns next to the new footage. Some details matched, others didn't quite line up, and it's those small mismatches that are driving the conversation forward. One example that stood out involved reaction timing. In earlier descriptions, a specific individual was said to respond immediately after the first sign of conflict. But in the new footage, that response appears slightly delayed. Again, not by much, but enough to be noticed. Enough to make people question whether the sequence of events has been interpreted correctly from the start. And once that question is asked, it doesn't go away. Because now every detail is being re-examined with a different mindset. Not accepting, but questioning. Not assuming, but analyzing. And the deeper people go, the clearer one thing becomes. This isn't about proving a completely different story. Not yet. It's about realizing that the story people accepted might not be the full one. The more that idea settled in that the story might not be complete, the more people started paying attention to details they had ignored before. Not the obvious moments, not the parts already discussed, but the edges of the footage, the background, the movement that doesn't demand attention but still exists. And that's where another shift quietly began. Because in this newly surfaced clip, there are figures who weren't previously mentioned, not clearly identified, not central to the scene, but present. Standing slightly outside the main focus, moving in ways that don't fully match the urgency of the moment. That alone raised new questions. Not accusations, just questions. Who were they? When did they arrive? And why weren't they part of earlier breakdowns of that night involving King Von? Fans are shocked, but now the reaction feels more investigative than emotional. People are isolating those background movements, circling figures, comparing clothing, matching positions across different clips. It's no longer about what happened in the center, it's about everything happening around it, because sometimes the clearest answers don't sit in the obvious place. At the same time, a new voice entered the conversation, someone claiming to have been present that night but never spoke publicly before. No verified identity, no confirmed connection, just a short audio clip posted and then removed within minutes. In that clip, the voice says, "Y'all looking at the wrong moment. It started before that." That line shifted the direction again. Because if the situation didn't begin where people thought it did, then everything that followed might be missing context. And context is what gives meaning to every second that came after. Without it, actions look isolated. With it, they become part of a sequence. Emotions ran high as that idea spread. Some viewers dismissed the clip as unverified. Others leaned into it, saying it aligns with the pause people already noticed in the footage. That small gap before everything escalates, it now feels more significant, less like a delay, more like a moment where something already in motion reaches a turning point. Meanwhile, older conversations involving people connected to the situation started resurfacing again, but this time, they were being heard differently. Lines that once sounded vague now feel specific. Statements that seemed general now feel pointed. One particular quote from an earlier interview stood out. "Everything ain't always what it looked like on camera." At the time, it didn't carry much weight. Now, it feels directly tied to what people are seeing. The family was left divided in how they approach this new wave of attention. Some members reportedly want clarity answers, explanations, something concrete that addresses these inconsistencies. Others are said to be more cautious, concerned about how far this conversation might go and what it might uncover. That division doesn't weaken the situation, it makes it more real, because it shows the emotional weight behind every question being asked. At the same time, something else started happening quietly in the background. Certain clips began disappearing, not all of them, but enough to be noticed. Versions of the footage that were widely shared just hours before suddenly became harder to find. Links stopped working, posts got taken down, and while nothing was officially confirmed, the pattern felt familiar. Because when information starts becoming less accessible right when interest peaks, people notice. And that only adds more pressure to the situation. Because now it's not just about what's being revealed, it's about what might be getting removed. Another subtle detail pushed things even further. A comparison between two versions of the same clip showed a slight difference in audio timing. Not a major edit, just enough to suggest that the footage might have been processed before being released. That raises another question: was the clip altered for clarity, or adjusted in a way that changes how it's perceived? That question doesn't have an answer yet, but it adds another layer to everything already being discussed. Because now there are multiple possibilities sitting side by side. The footage could be revealing something that was missed, or it could be incomplete in a different way. And without full access to everything that exists from that night, there's no way to confirm which one is true. But one thing is becoming impossible to ignore. The more people look, the more they find. And the more they find, the less certain the original story feels. By now, the conversation had moved far beyond curiosity. It wasn't just people online analyzing clips anymore, it felt like pressure building from every direction at once. Because when multiple details stop aligning at the same time, it doesn't just create questions, it creates urgency. And that urgency was starting to reach the people closest to the situation involving King Von in a way that couldn't be ignored anymore. Another statement surfaced, this time from someone described as being directly connected to the family circle. It wasn't a formal announcement, no press release. Just a recorded message that spread quickly before disappearing. The voice sounded controlled, but there was tension underneath it. "We not saying everything wrong, we saying everything not there." That distinction landed hard. Because it didn't deny the known version of events, it challenged its completeness. And that's a different kind of pressure. It doesn't accuse, it questions. It opens the door without fully stepping through it. And once that door is open, people start looking at everything differently. Fans are shocked, but now the energy has shifted again. It's no longer just about discovering inconsistencies, it's about understanding why those inconsistencies exist. Why certain details were emphasized while others never surfaced. Why some angles were widely circulated while others are only appearing now. And that's where the situation starts to feel layered. Because information doesn't just appear, it moves through channels. It gets selected, reviewed, sometimes delayed. And when something shows up late, especially in a case that people believed was already understood, it forces a different kind of question. Not just, what is this? But why now? Emotions ran high when another technical breakdown of the footage revealed something subtle but important, a shift in audio synchronization during a key moment. It wasn't dramatic. Most viewers wouldn't notice it on a normal watch. But once pointed out, it became hard to ignore. The sound of movement didn't perfectly match the visual timing for a brief second. That could mean nothing, or it could mean the clip was processed in a way that changed how that moment is experienced. And that uncertainty feeds everything else. Because if even 1 second of footage isn't perfectly aligned, it raises doubt about how the rest has been handled. Not confirmed doubt, just enough to keep people questioning. At the same time, more individuals who were present that night began speaking in indirect ways. Not interviews, not detailed accounts, just short remarks that hinted at perspective without fully explaining it. One person reportedly said, "Everybody got their version, but not everybody got the full picture." That line echoed across platforms because it captured exactly what people were starting to feel. There isn't one clear narrative anymore. There are fragments, perspectives, pieces that overlap in some places and don't in others. And without something definitive to bring those pieces together, the conversation keeps expanding instead of settling. The family was left divided in how to approach that expansion. Some voices are pushing for more transparency, encouraging any additional footage or information to come forward so everything can be seen in context. Others are more cautious, concerned about speculation turning into assumption. That tension is real, and it reflects the weight of what's at stake. Because this isn't just about public perception, it's about understanding what actually happened in a moment that changed everything. Meanwhile, the disappearance of certain clips continued. Not in a way that erased them completely, but enough to slow down how easily they could be accessed. That pattern didn't go unnoticed. Viewers started saving everything, archiving clips, sharing backups. It turned into a race not against time, but against uncertainty. Because once people feel like information might not stay available, they hold on to it differently. And that only intensifies the situation further. Another angle began circulating late, short, unclear, but enough to show a slightly different perspective of the same sequence. It didn't confirm a new version of events, but it added another layer to the existing one. Another piece that doesn't fully align, but doesn't completely contradict either. Just sits there, adding complexity. And that's where things stand now. Not resolved, not confirmed, not dismissed. Just complicated. Because every new detail brings clarity to one part of the story and uncertainty to another. And until everything is fully understood, if that ever happens, those two forces will keep existing side by side. And the more people look at it, the harder it becomes to look away. And now it comes down to you, because at this point, the story isn't as simple as people once believed. You've seen the footage, you've heard the reactions, you've watched how the narrative around King Von keeps shifting every time a new detail surfaces. Fans are shocked, emotions ran high, and still no one has stepped forward with something that fully connects every piece. So what do you think really happened? Do you believe this new footage is exposing something that was missed? Or do you think people are reading too much into moments that don't actually change the outcome? And if more clips come out angles we haven't seen yet, would it finally bring clarity, or just create more questions? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because this is one of those situations where every perspective adds to the bigger picture. Make sure you like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss what comes next. Because if anything else surfaces any new angle, any new statement you already know, we're breaking it down the second it happens. Stay locked in, because this story, it's far from over.